Good morning, friends. Welcome to Wake Up in the Word. Thanks for joining me this morning. We are in Genesis chapter 16. We're going to look at a big contrast from yesterday, from Genesis 15. Grab a cup of coffee. Let's go there. A lot of comments to be made, a lot of teaching from this chapter, but today I just want to kind of get through the story and lay it out for you, let you be thinking about it before what we'll be doing tomorrow. And listen, folks, understand, I fly by the seat of my pants on this every day. You're getting what I get on the spot every morning when I do Wake Up in the Word. If I'm a little hazy, maybe I'm not quite awake, you get that too. Well, in Genesis chapter 16, we've got an interesting problem. At least it's a problem in Abram's eyes. He's now been described as a man of faith. He's put faith in God's covenant. God has gone to extraordinary measures to demonstrate that covenant, even predict the future for Abram. What's he going to do with that? Is he going to continue to believe God and walk in it? Now, typically when God makes a promise, when God sets you up with something like that, very soon after the promise comes, you will be tested. What we're going to see today is Abram's test, and a test that he flunks with a big fat F. Oh, please don't get sanctimonious with me. I bet you've failed quite a few, haven't you? Me too, where God has tested us on various things and it didn't work out so well. Hopefully you learned the lesson and didn't repeat the same circumstances, didn't repeat the same mistakes that caused you to flunk the first time. Well, as we tend to learn from Scripture, when you fail the test, there are consequences. Sometimes they're short-lived. But in the case of what's going to happen in Genesis 16, the results of this test have echoed through history down to today. Go with me in Genesis chapter 16, verse 1. It says that Abram's wife, Sarai, had not borne any children for him, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Well, now, where did Hagar come from? Remember the first time they didn't believe God, and in time of trouble, when the famine hit, what did they do? They escaped to Egypt. Let's go down there to the breadbasket. Let's go to the big city. They've got all the food we'll be taken care of down there. And remember, it was a difficult time, a time of testing in Egypt, and Abram flunked that test too. Well, when they come back, they have all kinds of new possessions. Lot apparently had a change of heart, change of mind, some things that turned him towards Sodom by the time he came back. But Sarai also came back with a servant named Hagar, an Egyptian. Yes. So it tells us in verse 2 that Sarai, of course, knowing all about these promises of God, hearing them over and over from Abram, when they worship, when they talk about this in the tent, in the fields, and everything else, she's thinking, wow, do I need to help my husband out figuring out God's will? Do I really need to, work on this myself? Because he's supposed to have all these kids, and guess what? I know what my body is telling me. I'm old. I can't have kids. Something's got to break here. Maybe I need to figure this out and tell my husband what to do. And this is when the trouble starts. Watch this. She said to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Now hang on, watch. She puts it back in God's lap, blaming him for it. The Lord has prevented me from bearing children. I've been barren all these years. And I mean, look, let's be honest here. She's saying, Abram, it's not that we haven't been sleeping together. I mean, look how long we've been married, but yet no kids. It's the Lord's fault. God has prevented me from bearing children. So here's what I want you to do. Apparently he wants me to solve this problem for you. I want you to go to my slave. Perhaps through her, I can build a family. Okay. Does this make sense? Well, maybe on the surface it does. And many times when we come up with logical solutions to fulfill God's will, we, skirt around the belief we should have that God's going to take care of things. We try to make it happen ourselves. Now, I'm going to quit with so much commentary and let's read the rest of the story, see how that worked out for Abram and Sarah. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So in verse 3 it says, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife for him. This happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years. So yes, the promise has been there. And after 10 years, Sarai is saying, look, it's too long, too far, too old, here we go again. We've got to help God out with it. Maybe God's asleep at the switch here. He doesn't realize what's going on. We've got to provide a way for God to fulfill this promise. So it says in verse 4, he, Abram, slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When she saw that she was pregnant, her mistress became contemptible to her. Now, all of a sudden, she's like, all right, hey, I'm pregnant. It wasn't Abram's problem. It was yours, mistress, Sarai, my boss. Yeah, you're the one that couldn't get pregnant. There were a lot of attitudes like that throughout the ancient world. If you had not had children and you were in a marriage relationship, you were called barren. And, the whole idea is we've got to reproduce the next generation. If you don't, then maybe there's something wrong with you. Maybe you have sinned. And all of a sudden, Hagar is now smirking, running around the camp saying, hey, I'm pregnant. It's not Abram's problem. Abram and I got together and there's a child on the way. And all of a sudden now she's acting just downright ugly towards Sarai. So verse 5 says, then Sarai said to Abram, now watch this, you are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave into your arms. Now watch this, because first of all, Sarai was blaming God. God set us up for this, so here's my answer to the problem. But guess what, God? I've proposed an answer, and now I don't like the results. I don't like what's happening. So I've put my servant into your arms, and when she saw that she was pregnant, I became contemptible to her. Well, may the Lord judge between me and you. And now, all of a sudden, it's a marital issue between Abram and Sarai. Oh, goodness gracious, where does this go from here? You can feel the tension in the tent, can't you? Well, in verse number 6, Abram replied to Sarai, look, here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her. Then Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. Well, Sarai took her authority in hand and began to, with her own jealousy, jealous because what she wanted actually happened. Hagar is pregnant, and now she's angry about it. And so what does she do? She mistreats her. We're not told exactly what all that mistreatment equaled, but here are two unhappy women in the tent together. Now look what happens. It had happened that because of this mistreatment, Hagar said, I've had enough. I've had enough. I'm out of here. And so she ran away. Well, now what's God going to do about this? God's sitting back saying, well, here we go again. You guys are creating problems you wouldn't have had if you had just trusted me. But God doesn't always leave us in the mess we've made, does he? He intervenes. He does in verse 7. And the angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She replied, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. And the angel of the Lord said to her, you have conceived and will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. He will settle near all of his relatives. And so she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roi. For she said, in this place have I actually seen the one who sees me? Have I seen the God who sees me? You know, he's always invisible, but wow, he's appeared to me? Yes, well, his angel did show up to you, Hagar. So she names this God after what has happened to her. So in verse 14, that is why the well is called Bir Laharoi. Okay, so there's a well in this place, carried this name down through antiquity, and it's between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. Now, we've gotten through the story. Tomorrow we're going to bring some interesting facts out of that and let you see way beyond, but I want you to gather the basis of it, most of which I guess you know by now, but I don't want to take anything for granted. For those of you who might be even new to the story of Abram, what we have here is a son born, his name Ishmael. That son goes on to be the father of the Arab peoples, who have been contentious with the other son that's coming, Isaac and his descendants, the Jewish people. They have been cross with each other ever since. That's right. To this day, we have an Arab-Israeli conflict that rages in the Middle East, and here in these end times, the very center of that is going to be Jerusalem, a city which right now is, the center place of contention in the world, exactly as the prophet Zechariah predicted. Why? Because the descendants of Isaac and the descendants of Ishmael are both standing, looking at each other, saying, "This is my city. You can't have it. It's for me and my descendants, and it's not yours. Can we live in peace here? I don't think so." They've been contentious since the tent. Okay, they've been contentious for all of these generations. There have been times of peace. We have those great Abraham Accords that I'll be talking about later in this study that have happened, where many of Ishmael's descendants have agreed to live in peace with Isaac's descendants and love one another. But that's not been the case for the most part down through history. And it all goes back to Genesis chapter 16. That's why I say, if you're trying to figure out what's going on today with all the issues we face, the fuel shortages, the baby food shortages, the wars and rumors of wars, everything that's happening in the world today, you know where you find all the roots? You find it in God's book, in His Bible, in His Word. And that's why each and every day we wake up in the Word. Come join me on this journey. Let's keep it up until Jesus comes. Invite a friend, like it, share it, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's wake up in the Word every single day. God bless you. You have a good day in Him. And tomorrow we're going to dig deeper into this story, and you'll be amazed at some of the things, as we always are, that the Word of God has for us. God bless you.